Hi everyone, I'm just working on some sets here and I was mixing up some colors and thought I should make a video on the most common questions I get about royal icing cookies. I get a ton of questions on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook about what went wrong with the cookies, how do you do this, how do I get this color, how come my cookies aren't like yours, why do they look not shiny, why are they crumbly, flavorless, all those things kind of about cookies and icing. So I thought I'd go over some of the most common questions that I've come across and also in general what I've heard of people asking. So while I'm mixing my colors here, and here I'm just going over a video of mixing some basic colors and then I'm adding some black and some ivory to the colors just to change the shades and give you guys an idea of how you can change kind of a few colors into a lot. So while I'm mixing this, I will go over some questions with you guys. So I think one of the biggest issues or questions about royal icing is consistency. So one of the biggest questions or concerns about royal icing is the right consistency for outline and flooding. Do you have one consistency? Do you use two? Do you need three? Like, what are the rules? What is the, when people say 10 seconds or 20 seconds, what does that mean? And for everybody, it's a little bit different. So I'm just going to preface this and just say, whatever works best for you is what works best for you. So we can give you guys guidelines, we can tell you how it is, but if you find that something works good for you and it's giving you the results you want, you don't need to do what everybody else is doing. And I kind of found that out as like you compare yourself a lot or you try to do things where people say, no, I use a 10-second icing or 12-second icing and I only use one consistency. But if you can't get the results or it's not working for you, then do what you need to do. If you need to use 2 consistencies, 3 consistencies, whatever it is, sometimes you just have to play around with it. And if you find your lines aren't crisp, because you're using one consistency and you're not getting those kind of crisp lines and you're not getting the crisp shapes that you're doing, then maybe you need to use 2. So those are kind of the things that I went through when I started cookies were that I started out using one consistency because that's what I saw everybody using. And again, it was kind of like in the middle of not a thick icing, not a thin icing. It was enough to kind of hold somewhat of a shape, but also would kind of flood together if you shook it a little bit or kind of jiggled it. So my problem with this was that when I wanted to do certain designs and I wanted straight lines, I wanted to make sure, like, let's say you're doing a star. I don't want my star to have kind of bubbly edges. I want it nice and sharp and triangular. I couldn't get that with that icing. So I figured, okay, if I start using 2 consistencies and I do an outline, which basically just means a stiffer icing. When I use an outline, is it the same every cookie set that I do? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's thicker, sometimes it's thinner. And as long as it holds its shape, that's the goal of it. And again, I always say I like to dry my outline because dried icing doesn't move. So if you do an outline and then you flood right away, you can push your icing out a little bit. You can push your outline out because it hasn't dried, so it's not stiff in its kind of spot. So again, some people don't like their outline showing, so they'll flood right away so that the icing kind of sort of mix in together while still holding its shape. So again, those are just little things I've noticed. If your icing is too thick, so you've added too much powdered sugar while you're thickening it up for an outline consistency, I find the icing gets a little bit dry and it doesn't quite stick to the cookie. So you go to start a line, you're outlining your cookie and it kind of doesn't really stick right away and the line kind of just follows your piping bag. So sometimes that means to me I didn't add enough water. I need to just add a few more drops of water just to like make it a little bit more wet just to stick to the cookie properly. And sometimes with dry icing, what happens is when it dries, it becomes too crumbly because there's not enough water to kind of bind everything together. There's too much powdered sugar, it's too dry, and it just comes crumbly once it's all dry. So that's kind of the major thing. With flood, again, is my flood always the same every cookie order? No. Sometimes I have very loose floods and I put too much water in. Sometimes it's too thick. Do I adjust it sometimes while I'm doing cookies? Yes. So as annoying as it is to take your icing out of a bag and add some more water or add more powdered sugar if it's too loose, too runny, if it's giving you a lot of trouble, you will save, yourself a headache. So if your icing is really not cooperating, make sure you take it out of the bag, add water if you need to thin it down. If you need to thicken it up, add slightly more icing sugar, or you can also add your outline icing, your thicker icing to it, just to thicken it up a bit. And again, play around. If it's puddling everywhere, you know it's too thin. If it is kind of not smoothing out enough, then you know it's too thick. So that's really what you're looking for. And again, when I mix my icing, I kind of run it off my spatula and I see, is it settling into the icing itself too easily without any work? Then I know it's really too thin. If it's really thick and it's never settling, then I know it's too thick. So again, I play around with the bowl. I kind of work my spatula around, and then I will see how it's settling in. If I jiggle it, does it settle in nicely? Then that's kind of a good consistency to go for. All the icing right now that I'm mixing in these bowls, this is what I look for my outline consistency. And you can see it's still kind of movable. It's not super thick. It's easy to mix in the colors. It's kind of a soft peak when you lift up the spatula, kind of flops over a little bit. This is kind of good. It's thick. It will hold its shape. You can see it's not melting flat. It's holding all those kind of scrapes that I'm doing on the side. And, you know, it's wet enough to kind of stick to the cookie nicely. So, and again, another trick for coloring icing, like I said, is to add some black or ivory or both. It's a little bit scary when you add a little bit of black to certain colors, but it really takes your color to another level. And ivory is a great way to tone down any tones. So ivory, again, is very scary when you first put it in because it looks very brown and you think, oh no, I've ruined my icing. But as you mix it in, it kind of disappears and it softens the color. So great for like baby sets, baby shower sets, people that don't want too bright of colors. And it really takes any color to another level. Even just adding it to white, just to soften, you know, a white that you don't want a bright white cookie, you want a kind of ivory cookie, or just like give it a little bit of different background. It's a great trick to have. And you can really take your colors from, you know, having 5, 6 basic colors to making 3, 4 shades of each. And it's amazing. So I always start with like a basic color pack, AmeriColor or Chef Master are the brands that I normally use, whatever I can get my hands on. And then I always make sure that I have like a larger bottle of black or ivory on hand as well, because I use those often as well. So it's always good to have your basic colors, your purples, your pinks, your yellow, blue, red, green. I don't like mixing, like a purple is really hard to get for me, so I like to actually buy specific purples. And then I just have those basic colors. Lemon yellow is also a great one to have. Sometimes I'll add it to my reds to brighten them up, especially for Christmas, because I find a lot of the reds are too dark when they dry. So lemon yellow is a really good one to add to like green, add to red, and it just kind of gives it a little more brightness to it. Even like a purple or something, it just changes the tone slightly and brightens it up. It's a really, really good one to have. Those are the colors that I tend to have on hand mostly. And yellow, I usually have like an egg yellow and a lemon yellow, because lemon yellow is nice and bright, but I find it very light on its own. And egg yellow is very yellowy, which is great, but sometimes I just need to brighten it up a little bit. So I find whenever I do yellow as a color, I'll mix the two together and it gives me the perfect yellow. So another common question is, how long does it take for royal icing to dry? And this can vary really on how humid your area is, if it's in like the summer, if it's winter and all that stuff. Like everything baking wise, cookies are a little temperamental and so is icing. But in general, I would always say make sure you give yourself at least overnight with your cookies uncovered. You do not want to stick your freshly iced cookies or even not fully dried cookies in a container with a lid or covered, because then you will not dry the icing. Then your icing will not dry. So you want to make sure that you have your cookies out either on a table or on several cookie trays, kind of in, you know, with space in between. So I know there's some like stackable kind of little feet you can get for your cookie trays to stack one on top of the other to save some space. I use a dehydrator and I like using the shelves with that. So I usually dry them in there for a bit. And then by the end of the night when I'm done decorating, I'll leave the door of the dehydrator open and I'll kind of take the shelves kind of half out just so they get a little bit more airflow. And that's usually enough for overnight. And this way, by the morning time, everything's dry. You're ready to bag your cookies, box them up or whatever. When you have to deliver them or hand them to somebody or bring them to a party, they're all good. So I always try to make sure that minimum I finish the cookies the day before the party or whatever pick up or delivery that needs to be done. The steps in between that I normally do depends, like a flood maybe takes a little while, like maybe half an hour to 40 minutes if you have a dehydrator or if you have a fan blowing on them. You just need a little bit of air circulation to dry the icing, and then you can do your next layer. I always try to do my next layer as soon as I can, like when it's crusted over, which means the top layer of the icing looks dry, but underneath it's not quite dry. So crusted over is when you want to do your next layers to prevent craters, because the moisture in the icing helps the next layer kind of stay nice and puffy. Another way to prevent craters is people like to poke holes in their icing before they flat on top like their design. I've tried it, it works. Is it 100% of the time? I haven't tried it enough to say like it works all the time. I usually try to do as many methods as I can, but poking holes only works if you will do the details on top of like a crusted flood. So if your cookie is fully dried, you won't be able to poke through the icing very easily. Like it will be really hard and it really won't help because you won't have that moisture. And I do like squiggles with my outline consistency. So that kind of just helps support the icing. And when I do the squiggles, I'll flood right on top. While the squiggle is still wet, I won't wait for it to dry. And again, just the reason being is because I've let the icing dry before and flooded over. And when I'm smoothing with my scribe, sometimes I hit the icing that's underneath the squiggles and then I get like little chunks of dried royal icing. So for me, again, it was trial and error. When things don't work, I just kind of switch it up. A lot of people let it dry, but it doesn't quite work for me that way. So when you see me doing squiggles all the time, that's why. And people ask like, how do you know when to do one? How do you know when not to do one? And you can see here, like in the dinosaur, I'm squiggling all over it. This is a little bit of a larger area, but sometimes even these kind of areas get little indents in the middle. So it takes a second or two. I'm already outlining with that icing. I might as well just do a squiggle, and it kind of keeps everything nice and puffy, and it saves me from having craters. Now, if you do get a crater, it's not the end of the world. First of all, I promise most people won't notice. I've had craters in my cookies, especially in the beginning when I didn't know how to prevent them. And I just was devastated for so many orders. And when I talked to the customers or I talked to my friends that got the cookies, they didn't even realize what it was, didn't even notice it. So I wouldn't fret over it too much. However, if you do want to prevent them or fix them, let's say, you tried everything, but you still got craters, make sure you have a flat fan. Make sure you have a fan blowing or a dehydrator. That helps a lot. Dehydrator, make sure it's on a low heat setting. You don't want it warm at all. You just kind of want it for the fan. And if you do get a crater, you can put a little bit of flood icing and get a damp paintbrush and just kind of swipe it over top. So you kind of just get that water and it will smooth the icing over in the hole. Is it perfect? Is it like seamless? Not really. But if you don't want to have the hole there and it's something really prominent on your cookie, that will help hide it. So that's my best way of hiding craters if it's something that I really didn't want to have a crater on. That's a good way to hide it after. And if you get a lot of air bubbles in your icing, so sometimes when you get bubbles, they'll dry and they create little holes sometimes after they pop when they dry. So the best way that I get rid of bubbles, and I always do this, is I let my icing sit. So after I've mixed it and I've added water, especially to your flood, when you add water and you mix it a lot, you'll get a lot of air bubbles. So what I do is I mix all my icing, my two consistencies, my outline and my flood. So my flood is the one with more water in it. I cover them with damp paper towels. And as I bag up all of my outline consistency and I start outlining some of my cookies, then I go back when I need my flood. And by the time, that's done, it might have sit between 15 minutes and half an hour, 45 minutes, how many of our cookies I'm doing. I go back to that and you'll have tons of bubbles on top of your icing. So you just take your spoon and you just kind of go over those bubbles, get as many popped as you can. It takes like a minute. And once you do that, you've gotten most of them. If you start mixing, you'll kind of see a few more bubbles there underneath inside the icing, but don't worry about those too much. It's more those big surface ones that are coming to the surface that you don't want. Because when you flood, and your cookie's sitting there, those bubbles slowly rise and then they kind of, create problems. So bubbles are really easy. Let your icing sit for a bit. And again, it's not like I'm sitting there waiting for my icing. I'll usually start outlining them and then come back. Other people swear by the helicopter method, which is basically you bag your icing up right away and hold on really tight. Make sure you have like a knot tied in your icing bag before you cut your bag, and you just swing your bag around like a helicopter, not holding the tip, but the other side. You'll hold the side with the open bag at the top of the bag, and you would just swing it really hard. This works for me sometimes, but I prefer letting my icing sit. It's a much better method for me. Another thing I get commonly asked is, how do I store decorated cookies? Do they go stale? And can I freeze them? So you can store them, again, once they're fully dry. So you want to wait, like at least 8 hours or overnight. Make sure they're uncovered. Let them dry. They will not dry out. If you have a good recipe and you have a layer of icing on top, it kind of seals in the freshness. So I usually work on my cookies for 3 to 4 days. They're out in the open on the counter or in my dehydrator, just sitting there kind of with the door open. And they're fresh. They're still soft. They taste great. Don't worry about it so much. This is like a good cookie that gets all the moisture locked in with the icing. So once they're fully dry, I would seal them in an airtight container, or I would have them sealed up in bags with like a heat sealer, or you can tie your bags or so on. So these are kind of the ways that I deliver my cookies. If someone wants them bagged individually, that's what I do. Heat sealers are really cheap on Amazon. I've got some linked in my store. Or you can get those like Rubbermaid containers. And then freezing cookies as well is a great way. Even if you like want to freeze your cookies for a day or two, like if you've done them a few days early, frozen cookies that have been defrosted taste really good, if not better than fresh cookies, because it just, I don't know, it locks in that moisture. So don't worry about edible marker. Don't worry about, your icing. Don't worry about the details. Nothing, I promise, will happen to your frozen cookies. I've frozen all types of different cookies. I've frozen these dinosaur ones. They've come out perfectly fine. And I've used edible marker on them and it was great. So the only thing about freezing them is people say not to open the container unless they're fully defrosted. And the reason we say that is because if you open the container while your cookies are still cold, they will get condensation on them and it could potentially smudge any edible marker, or kind of, if you have like a black icing on white, like an eyeball or something, it will maybe smudge a little bit if you go to bag it too early or so on. So, and it kind of ruins the shine of the cookie a little bit when it gets a little bit of moisture on it. So is it the end of the world? No. I've tested cookies in the freezer, taken them out, opened them back up, the bag up or the container up right away, and kind of touch the cookies, see what would happen. And nothing major. It's not the end of the world, but it would be best if, the night before you need them, or like the morning of if you need them later in the day, give them a few hours, 3-4 hours, to just sit on the counter, take the container out, put it on the counter, don't touch it, don't open it. They'll be fine, I promise. And it works really, really well. So if you want to do like freeze cookies before they're decorated, totally fine. Fully decorated cookies as well, it's completely fine. I've frozen them in Ziploc bags, in containers. I've frozen them just in their heat sealed bags. All of them have been great. So don't worry about any of that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is color bleed. So this is a really common one that happens. And the biggest way to prevent color bleed is to add white to your icing. So if you check out my roll icing recipe on my channel, one of the ingredients I list is white color, which basically is like an ingredient to me. I put it in my icing when I make it. So I don't add it like when I'm making my colors and so on. All of that icing goes white first, and then it gets colored into black, red, green, blue, whatever it might be. It doesn't affect it. It just helps with color bleed. So that is my number one tip for preventing color bleed and not having too loose of an icing. Fresh icing works way better. So if you've left your icing for 3-4 days and you're going to be doing black next to white or red or so on, try to do those kind of quicker if you can in the first couple of days of your icing, and store your icing bags in the fridge overnight. It helps with separation. but I find the icing loosens and kind of loses its quality after you've let it sit out on the counter for a few days or in the fridge. So that's kind of what I try to do, is do the things I think that will bleed or do those steps earlier than later. But adding white to the icing is super, super important for color bleed. So with all those tips, I hope I've answered most of your questions. If you guys have any more, let me know in the comments. I do have a lot of tutorials on icing, cookie recipe, and all the things you need to know about royal icing decorating. So check it out on my channel. Thanks for watching and happy baking.